20 minutes past 8 o'clock. Well, when I think of Ottawa's Chinatown, I think of that stretch along Somerset West between Bronson and Preston and the side streets. But I didn't know that that's not where Ottawa's Chinatown was originally. You could learn where it all started at a new City Hall exhibit. It's called Stories from Ottawa's Chinese-Canadian Community. The CBC's Giacomo Panico got a first-hand look with City Archivist Paul Henry and with Robert Yip, a community advocate and part-time historian who contributed artifacts to the collection. Giacomo began by asking Robert why he's worked so hard to share the stories of Chinese Canadians in Ottawa.
Well, I think sort of a recognition that the history of Chinese Canadians has not been well represented in schools, definitely not in media. And it's time to, tell the story as it was. My parents were born here. They didn't have the right to vote. They couldn't swim in public swimming pools. I didn't learn any of this in Canadian history. It was sort of all about Christopher Columbus, Confederation. And Chinese people came to work on the railway, and later they opened restaurants across Canada. And today Chinese food is loved by everyone. And there's a lot of history I don't know, and we should know it so that people can understand. When this project came, I said, okay, this is perfect because I've been interested in this area for a long time. This is what I found from the Ottawa Journal. Going back as part of this process, I was looking through old Ottawa Journal newspapers. January 13th, 1942, the Chinese Aces, this was an all-Chinese hockey team that started in the early 40s, and they were still in high school. They were a very, very popular team.
There they are on the front page.
On the front page.
All 7 players and 3 coaches.
Yes, that's right. And, they did well. They once even beat the Elmer Saints, which included some players later who went on to the NHL. So it was wonderful, because when people think of Chinatown, they think of rice and chopsticks. I said, well, here's a story about ice and hockey sticks. Right. This is something different.
And Paul, around us here, it's a smaller room, but rich with many artifacts like this.
Yes, this is part of our Tapestry project, and Tapestry's aim is to connect the archives with the more diverse communities in Ottawa to see that people who visit the archives and use our facility can see themselves in the collections that are here. Tapestry is an ongoing project. It's not a one-off. We've started with the Ottawa Chinese community, but this year, in fact, we'll be working with the Caribbean diaspora. And there are other communities in Ottawa that are on our panel and are assisting us to make those inroads into the community, to bring the artifacts and the archival materials especially into the archives so they can be preserved for future generations. And that includes much of what Robert has brought us.
I want to jump off a point you said about the stereotype that people would have had in Ottawa of Chinese Canadians, and especially Chinatown. And here you've got a poster that right away says, hold on, Chinatown was not always on Somerset Street West.
That's right. It started on Albert Street, close to Bank Street. And there's only one restaurant that is still there. The Cafe restaurant is still, on the area, but it's been taken over. But yeah, that's where it started off, with a few laundries, grocery store, things like that. And it was there up until the late 60s or thereabouts, but then all kinds of government buildings were put there, and the Chinatown moved up to Somerset Street West.
Paul, as an archivist yourself for the entire city of Ottawa here, of the artifacts that came in for this exhibit that you uncovered, that Robert brought as well to the project, what really stands out for you?
Well, I think, and Robert can certainly speak to this, and what stands out for me are the head tax certificates. They're a very tangible way of connecting people to history.
The first piece of legislation directed towards a specific ethnic group of people was the Chinese head tax in 1885. And this was coming as the completion of the CPR railway was wrapping up, because Chinese labor was needed for the construction through the most difficult and dangerous parts of the Rocky Mountain. So about 15,000 to 17,000 railway workers were recruited, but it was clear once the railway was nearing completion, people in BC and the federal government said, well, Your labor was needed. Thank you for a great job, well done, but go home. We don't want you anymore. We want to restrict immigration, so they passed a $50 head tax in 1885, which went up to $100. Many of the people who were already here also wanted to perhaps bring their wives over, and they wanted to stay, so they had to pay. This is a head tax certificate dated July 1914. Chow Kui Fong. It's a young boy, so when he came, I guess his parents must have brought him, it was 1922. So he paid the head tax, but by 1903 it was up to $500. And then the head tax was not the worst. The Chinese Immigration Act of 1923, or the Chinese Exclusion Act, was passed, which prohibited Chinese people from coming, and anybody here had to register. And this basically ended Chinese immigration from 1923 to 47. This is important to give a complete history of Chinese Canadian history. There's the good, the bad, and the very ugly. So it's important for everyone to know this history, to understand the difficulties, and I think especially true for new Canadians of Chinese descent who may come to Canada and Ottawa and say, this is a wonderful, very accepting place. It wasn't always like that. It was people who came long before, who fought long and hard. My uncle, Yip, was the first Chinese Canadian lawyer. He was on the committee, and he helped repeal the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1947 with a Jewish lawyer, Irving Himmel.
Obviously a proud moment for you and your family. And another proud display here, Robert, is your work here, and I was saving it for now. We've got an old AM/FM radio and some cassette tapes. What's going on here?
Well, this was from a radio program called Orientation, your Sunday morning mixture of commentary, music, and
community news. Canada's one and only English language radio program produced by, but not exclusively for, Chinese Canadians.
Broadcast on?
Shea 106. Ken Rockburn was our main man, and this ran from 1982 to 88.
This is Robert Yip. On today's show, we'll be leading off with an item about how the Ottawa Police are going to get more visible minorities. And we'll also learn what some people think is wrong with the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
That's a taste of Orientation, a radio program from the 1980s broadcast on Shea 106, hosted at that time by Robert Yip. He's now a part-time historian who donated items to an exhibit on display now at the City of Ottawa Archives. The exhibit is called Stories from Ottawa's Chinese Canadian Community. It's part of the Tapestry Presents series happening at the city's Central Archives, the James K. Bartleman Centre. That's at the corner of Woodruff and Tallwood. We also heard from City of Ottawa Archivist Paul Henry, and they were speaking to the CBC's Giacomo Panico. That exhibit runs until March 16th.